Hello everybody, welcome to this Paper Efficiency in Packaging Exchange. Thank you for registering for this webinar, and thank you specifically to Mandy Haggett, the Coordinator for European Paper Network, and James Skelton, who's Sainsbury's Packaging and Print Technology, for presenting. My name's Abby Weaver. I'm hosting the webinar for the EAUC today. As you'll probably know, the EAUC is delivering a sustainability exchange, which is funded by HEFKI and led by Staffordshire University. So very briefly, what are exchanges? Well, basically, they are free webinars which are held usually at lunchtime, although obviously today this one is a little bit later. And they're held on a range of sustainability topics affecting the sector. Anyone can work with us to produce an exchange webinar. So if you've got any ideas or suggestions for future webinars or exchanges, if you can get in contact with us, that would be brilliant. You can email us at sustainabilityexchange@eauc.org.uk. That would be fab. So before we start, quick housekeeping points. Firstly, I hope everyone can hear me okay. If you're having any problems or you need to get my attention during the presentation, please use the chat box on the bottom right-hand side of the page. I'll be keeping an eye on that, and I'll do my best to help you if you're having any problems. The webinar will consist of a presentation by Mandy and Jane, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave it to the end of the presentation. I've put everybody on mute at the moment to reduce the background noise so that we can hear Mandy and Jane properly. We want to be able to hear everything they say. So if you have any questions, send me a message in the chat box at the bottom saying question, and I will unmute you and let you ask your question. If you don't have a microphone, then please just write your question in the chat box, and I'll make sure that it gets picked up and answered. Like I say, I'll be monitoring that chat facility throughout the webinar, so we'll make sure you get heard. The webinar is also being recorded, so you can view it again or share it with your colleagues later on. This is the final webinar in a series of 3 that's being carried out on this subject. So if you are interested in the earlier ones, you can view them on the Sustainability Exchange website. This webinar will be made available on the website on the Sustainability Exchange for the presentation and the webinar full a few hours after this is finished. And finally, if you'll be sent a short survey after the webinar, so we'd like to gain your feedback. It's very short, so it'd be really grateful if you could take the time to complete it. The feedback you give us will help us to make sure that our future webinars are just tip-top, so that'll be great. So thank you once again, and I'll hand over first to Mandy.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks to the EAUC for hosting this series of 3 webinars that we've been doing. Basically, I will give a short presentation introducing the idea of paper efficiency in packaging and why we think it's important, and then Jane Skelton from Sainsbury's will give a short case study. Who am I? I'm the coordinator of the European Environmental Paper Network. We're a coalition of 70 civil society organisations who are concerned about environmental and human rights issues all across Europe, ranging from the big organisations you'll have heard of like Greenpeace and WWF, down to smaller, more locally oriented or more issue-oriented organisations. What we all have in common is a vision of transformation in Europe, and there's a similar network in North America with a similar vision for a shift towards a much more sustainable production and use of paper in our societies. We all believe that paper, pulp and paper, is a material that can genuinely be completely sustainable, but we're not quite there yet. So we came together in 2006 to work together to try to shift our society towards more sustainable use of this material. And that vision has 5 pillars. The first of which is that we'd like to see reduced consumption in countries where consumption is currently very high, like the UK. In order to free up this kind of limited resource so that other countries where consumption is very low can increase their consumption for all the valuable things that paper can do without needing a global explosion in paper production. Where paper is being used, we'd like to see less reliance on virgin forest fibre, so more use of recycled fibres, and to ensure social responsibility and responsible sourcing of forest fibres, and also to see guaranteed clean production of paper. So, in short, what we'd like to do is to protect beautiful forests like this one in British Columbia from this sort of impact, and particularly where it's being cut in order to generate paper that ends up just being dumped. So that's the short form, really, that we're interested in trying to promote sustainability right the way along the life cycle of paper, from production through use and to disposal. So why is that? And the reason is because the impacts of paper production and use are very broad and cross-cutting. The climate change impacts of paper are substantial, and we're running a seminar on the 9th of July, to which you'll all be very welcome, in London, where we'll be looking specifically at the climate change emissions from paper. In some parts of the world, forests are still being destroyed in order to generate pulp for paper. Its production uses large amounts of energy, and it's the single biggest item in our waste streams in Europe. Production also uses a lot of water and causes pollution, which needs to be checked. In some parts of the world, pulp plantations are highly unwelcome and unsuited to where they're growing. And there are other social problems connected with paper production in some parts of the world, particularly in developing countries and in Russia, where illegal logging is a real problem, and human rights abuses, particularly land rights abuses, are connected with paper production. So we're very keen to advocate that every big paper user takes care to make sure that they source paper from sustainable and responsible sources. The primary goal of that vision, which was to reduce paper consumption, has led to our project called the Shrink Paper Project, which we ran initially a few years ago, and the current version of this project is assessing 60 UK organisations who are all large paper users to try and get a picture of a broad spectrum of UK society, to find out who's taking paper efficiency seriously. So we've looked at supermarkets, catalogue retailers, financial companies, utility companies, governmental bodies and universities. And the scorecard of the results of our assessment will be published in July of this year. We've also set up a new website, and we're accumulating paper-saving case studies. We're very interested to learn of any examples of people taking care to be efficient with paper. And we've also been running some of these webinars, and like I mentioned, the Paper Vapor seminar, which will be in July. So, why are we interested in packaging? I'll make a few points. The first thing that I'd like to make clear from the very start is that what we're not advocating is that packaging should shift from paper to plastics or other materials, unless it's possible to prove that by doing so you make clear reductions in ecological footprints. So we're very aware that there are alternatives to paper, and we're keen to see efficient use of materials rather than displacement of impacts into other areas. We also recognise that packaging has got many important functions. So it keeps goods safe from breakages and contamination. It has an important hygiene role. It enables goods to be more easily transported without damage. It attracts customers to goods, and it conveys information. So labelling and other information that's on packages is an important function of packaging. And what we're interested in is how smart design of packages can maintain all of these important functions while maximising the efficiency of the material used in the package. So if we look at packaging in Europe, we can see that the two segments of this is a picture of paper use in Europe at the moment, and we can see that almost half it comes down to packaging. So either primary packaging of goods or secondary packaging, shipping and packing materials together account for 47% of all the paper used in Europe. So there are clearly big opportunities for us in Europe to tackle paper efficiency in packaging to reduce our overall paper consumption. And again, given that paper is a cause of large amounts of carbon emissions, we estimate 8% of global emissions, it's quite clear that efficiency in packaging could help to both individual organisations and countries like the UK to reach our climate change emission reduction targets. So what I'm going to do is give 3 very brief case studies of some really nice examples of paper efficient packaging. The first of them is Patagonia, who produce outdoor gear, and they used to pack their thermal base layers, long johns and vests and so forth, in cellophane and paper packets. And then they shifted to a simple cardboard sash around these products, and they were pleased because that eliminated the use of cellophane, which they were worried about the sustainability of cellophane packets, whereas the cardboard that they replaced it with is completely recyclable, and so they reduced their overall use of material by a huge extent. But what was really interesting about this case study is that their sales rocketed, and they found out that that was because the customers could feel the texture of the materials that they were buying, and they realized that their original packaging had actually been getting in the way, and it was getting between the customer and the product. So I think this is an interesting example of getting rid of packaging actually enabling a better contact to be made between customer and goods. The second example is from Hewlett Packard, and this is an example that is clearly relevant to all sorts of organisations, not just retail organisations. They used to move their printers around in large, heavy, very strong cardboard boxes with lots of internal buffering in order to try to minimise breakages. A smart design person in the company completely rethought what they were doing and replaced those big cardboard boxes with reusable shelving units wrapped in cling film, basically. That reduced their packaging volumes by more than 90%. And what was really interesting about this case study is that it decreased the amount of breakages. So everybody had assumed that one of the important roles that the cardboard boxes was playing was to protect the printers. But it turned out that actually the boxes were enabling people to basically throw the printers around and manhandle them really quite roughly. And so reducing the amount of packaging enabled people to see that this was a fragile object that needed to be treated more carefully. So again, a kind of counterintuitive result and an interesting use of smart design. I do want to raise one caveat with this example, which is that although they assure us that the environmental impacts of the replacement of the paper were less than the paper that was being used because the shelving units were reusable and so forth, I have not actually seen life cycle analysis of the comparative environmental impacts of the cardboard versus the alternative. But I think it's an interesting example just for that kind of principle that a protective package is not necessarily always doing the protection that you want from it. The third example is from Duchy Originals, and they redesigned their chocolate boxes, saving 48% of the material involved. And they basically shifted from a quite chunky box, the one on the top left, down to a much more slimline, sleek, lightweight box. And the impact, again, was that their sales increased dramatically. Oops, sorry. Because the redesigned box had a much kind of sleeker, high quality kind of feel about it. They quantified very carefully how much material they saved, which was 8.9 tons of packaging material. And we worked out that that saved 230 trees, almost 1 million litres of water, 58 tons of carbon emissions, and more than 10 tons of other air, water and solid pollution. So there are clearly, as well as the economic benefits of the saved money in packaging and increased sales, there were really broad environmental benefits of this change. So I'd like to hand over now to Jane Skelton, who's going to give you another really exciting case study from Sainsbury's. And I'll hand the little ball over to Jane.
So can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yep, brilliant. Of course you can't speak, so apologies for that. So I am Jane Skelton. Thank you very much, Mandy. That was really interesting, actually. Really interesting to sort of hear other points of view. So I am the packaging and print technology manager here at Sainsbury's, and I have a team of packaging technologists that work for me. And we work in conjunction with all of our product technologists, product developers, buyers, everybody in order to sort of get the right package for the right product. And that can be very easy or it can be very difficult. And hopefully today I'm going to sort of take you through one of the projects that we worked on recently. So before I start, I'm going to talk to you about what our customers expect. And when I say our customers, I mean consumers in general. So it could be a customer for any supermarket. So it was really interesting to hear Mandy talk about the fact that packaging is really important. And it's really great to hear that, because the way we normally hear about it is from customer complaints, because our customers, unfortunately, do nothing but complain about packaging. They don't really think about packaging until it's in their hand, ready to put in their recycling bin, or in fact just in their bin. We do still get an awful lot of customer complaints through to our chief executive, Justin King. Daily, really. I end up having to write daily letters back to customers, because they just see it as a big pain in the neck and something they have to deal with, and we should be doing more about it. So I suppose from their point of view, our job is to make it as easy as possible for them, and they expect us to be doing the right thing. We have targets which are in line with those of our customers' expectations, and just from doing the right thing. So we are signed up to what's called the Quartile Commitment, and I'm not sure whether all of you know about what the Quartile Commitment is, but basically it's a group of all the retailers and large brands that all got together to sign up to say that they were going to set targets to reduce packaging, reduce consumer waste, and reduce packaging waste. So actually we've been doing it for quite some time now, and our latest target around packaging is to reduce all our packaging by 50% by 2020, which is in relation to where we were in 2005. So as I'm sure you can all admit, that's quite a large target. And to use recycled or sustainable materials. Now, when we say that, we actually, when using paper, we would always look to use recycled paper first. But there are some products that just can't hold recycled paper. So a lot of products in the freezer would have to come from a virgin material so that they don't go soggy and end up in a right mess. And where we have to use sustainable materials, we therefore would insist on using FSC paper. We also try and make our packaging as recyclable as possible. And when it comes to packaging that's made of paper, that is obviously it's the easiest thing for us, because most, if not all, councils will take paper packaging away in the curbside, or you can, as you can see there, we've got lots of recycling facilities at Sainsbury's, and other retailers have them too. It's the other materials where we tend to sort of find things a little more difficult. So take you on to what we did on our toilet rolls. So not the most glamorous and exciting product, I know, but actually something that people use every day, and certainly something that we should be doing something about, and what we should, where our customers would expect us to be helping them. So we had to think about this rather differently, and I hope this kind of has resonance with you lot, that you have to kind of think about things differently when you're faced with a product or a packaging or just a situation where it doesn't seem an easy thing to do. So if you take a normal sort of pack of toilet roll, you've got toilet roll in a flow wrap, basically in some plastic pack, and I suppose instantly you would think, well, we'd look at the plastic packaging to try and reduce it, but actually we wouldn't be able to do that because you wouldn't be able to, it was too thin or, to be able to reduce any further, which means it wouldn't be protected through our supply chains. So what we did was we looked at it slightly differently. We looked at the inner tube. So you could actually say that the inner tube isn't necessarily packaging, it's probably part of the product. But from a customer's point of view, certainly from a consumer's point of view, they have to throw it away at the end of use, so therefore it is deemed as packaging. So what we did was we took 12 millimeters away from that inner tube. We still used exactly the same amount of paper on the product, on the toilet roll, same quality, but just by taking those 12 millimeters out of that inner tube, it still functioned and it still fitted onto everybody's toilet roll holders at home. We did all the tests, and we managed to save 300 tons of cardboard every year. It was then that we started to realise there were other benefits from this reduction, that we actually started to see that we could save 500 lorries as well each year. And if you put that into CO2 terms, that's 140,000 kilograms of CO2. So you can see that actually all these savings, suddenly we started to realise this was much bigger than we thought it was. Then when we start to do what we call transit trials, which is where before we put a product into store, we just make sure that it goes through our supply chain and through our depot system, through our back of stores and onto our shelves without breaking. And we realised that we actually got 14% more toilet rolls onto the pallet. And then an even further saving with the outer wrap, we actually saved another 35 tons actually of the polythene that wraps around the toilet roll. You can actually recycle that as well at front of store with our carrier bags. So you can see from right at the beginning where we knew we wanted to do something, and then we added up having all these extra benefits. So, you know, fewer lorries and fewer products on the pallet, and also on the shelf. It meant we could get more products on the shelf, which meant that we don't have to replenish them as much in store. And this is just a quick technical drawing so you can see where we were and where we got to in the end. So for a normal toilet roll, which has got a 50 millimeter core, which is about 123 millimeters in diameter, by taking out those 12 millimeters, we suddenly just we reduced it all the way down to 112 millimeters, which doesn't sound like a huge amount, but as you can see, it made a huge difference. And we actually we're shipping less air around. Unfortunately, there's still some air being shipped around for that inner tube, but that's the least we could get it to be able to give us this great story. And we put that message on the back of pack, and it's something that we're very proud of, and it was a very exciting project. So thank you very much for listening. And here are the sorry, we said earlier there is more information, but have you got any questions? Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks Mandy and Jane. That was brilliant, really interesting. I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions. If they could please let me know by using the chat facility at the bottom. That would be great. I have a quick question for you. I'm sure you're all aware that today it's World Environment Day. So I was just wondering really what benefits the project, Mandy, well, to both of you actually, what you think they bring to the wider issue of climate change that we're all facing. If I pass over to Mandy first. Hello, Mandy.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a huge issue actually. I mentioned that we have a seminar on the 9th of July in London, which is the title of which is Paper Vapor, and it's all about the climate change impacts of our paper use. And I think it's a little known fact that paper use actually causes more carbon emissions than aviation globally. So I think we're all quite conscious about not flying or trying to reduce the amount we fly in order to reduce our carbon emissions. But I think consciousness that paper use is actually even more significant is quite low. So you know, when we saw that picture that half of Europe's paper use is from packaging, the potential savings of carbon emissions by reducing packaging are actually really big. And then I get really inspired by that example from Jane, which I think, you know, the reduction in all of those lorries shipping materials around. I mean, that's a huge amount of carbon emissions that were saved there. So yeah, I think it is a really big and important part of the story, and we're very keen that people, companies and organisations like universities and government bodies make the connection between their paper policy and their climate change strategies.
That's great. Thanks, Mandy. I'm just wondering, Jane, if you wanted to say any more?
As I said, obviously customers have very high expectations of us, and I think, you know, Mandy, you're quite right in saying that, you know, 50% of paper use comes from packaging. So, you know, it is quite right that we are doing all we can to reduce it. And again, just to second what Mandy said, it doesn't mean we're going to take everything out of paper and put it into plastic. It just means we are very conscious and we're very careful that we're not packaging things unnecessarily. And I think another example I can give is we used to sell our pizzas, our own brand pizzas, in big, huge boxes, like actually you'll find most pizzas are, and we were absolutely determined to take the boxes away so that we could try or to reduce the boxes so that we could try and show the product to our customers, but actually reduce the amount of packaging used. So that was a 2-year-long project, and we have 75% less packaging. There's still paper used. We still use paper label, but I suppose we are constantly trying to do the right thing by our customers and therefore the right thing environmentally.
That's great. Janie, Meryl has asked a question as well. She just would like to know, how are packaging design companies being informed of the things you're both learning? Do these initiatives come as part of the brief? If I ask you first, Jane, if you could answer that, then I'll pass over to Mandy.
So we work in conjunction with packaging design companies. We work in conjunction with everybody, really. So when we go to launch a new product, we brief a product supplier and our packaging supplier at the same time. So they work alongside with us to be able to reduce the amount of packaging we use. We do find graphic design companies actually are very fond of trying to increase packaging, but we're make sure that we're doing the right thing environmentally rather than trying to cover it up with as many graphics as possible. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's great. And I'll just pass over to Mandy as well.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Meryl asked, how are packaging design companies being informed of the things that you are both learning? Do these initiatives come as part of the brief?
Okay. Yeah, we've not worked a huge amount directly with packaging design companies as such. Though we are working, and our seminar will feature Inventure, which is a consultant company that does work with packaging designers around Europe. So yeah, I think that the examples, certainly I know the Hewlett Packard example and the Patagonia example were very much kind of bright spark design-led ideas. And I think there's really quite an appetite for really much more creative packaging designs to go on and to be invented. Yeah, I think some of the very lightweight, strong new materials that are being made out of pulp and paper are also potentially really exciting for ways to reduce the actual volumes and weights of packages whilst retaining some of their protective functions.
That's great. Thank you, Mandy. And also, I'm not sure if you've seen, Lisa had a question for you that she put in the chat function. And she says, how would you sum up one key message from all of the 3 webinars?
Oh, I think it's one of the key things is that saving paper and making paper efficiencies can has got multiple benefits. So there are obviously strong environmental benefits, but it's also a really good way of saving money, obviously. And I think one of the things that's been thrown up by all three webinars is that looking hard at paper efficiencies can generate other side benefits at the same time. So whether that's things like reduced breakages in packages and so forth, there are unexpected benefits from looking and thinking creatively about paper efficiency.
That's great. I think your presentation has certainly shown that. Those examples are really interesting. If there are no further questions, then I would just like to say thank you very much to Mandy and to Jane. That was really, really interesting. As I say, the webinar has been recorded and will be put up onto the Sustainability Exchange shortly. So thank you very much to everyone for taking part. That was great. Thank you.